or not. So that's basically the next steps moving forward. There's basically going to be a meeting every month up until June, because we have a pretty tight schedule with this project. We have to finish it up by the last week of June, because we need to close out the contract at the end of June. So it's a pretty expedited process, but hopefully we can get all the information we need and get everybody involved and end up with a good product.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Yes.
If this commission is a political subdivision, how many of us here are going back to our towns and educating or asking questions or informing the town what ITS actually is? How many people are doing that? Is no one doing that?
Well, in my case, I'm a member of the planning board, so if that is, if we have a project or something relevant, yes, there would be input. To call a special meeting, we got hundreds of them already. We wouldn't be doing that, but hopefully some of us are in strategic committees and stuff, that at the relevant point we would be informed enough to interject it. So I don't know how it works in other towns.
This is only my second meeting, but I chair the planning board in Dover, and one of the things I was thinking of before you said anything is probably having Tom give because he's also on the Dover planning board, having him give an update when we do our committee updates at the end of the meeting, just to keep everyone informed and generate some interest into what's going on. And I think it has to start there.
Keeping people informed is just like the traffic is just moving in one direction. And sometimes it's better to be in a meeting and ask what are people's concerns after you explain what ITS is. Ask them, what's your concern? But you're going to hear people say, why do we need such a thing? They're going to look in our cars. Well, you can allay that fear if people understand it. But first, you got to know what the fears are. So, if we sit in the meeting and say, well, this is what ITS is. What do you think about it? After they know what it is, and if they have a concern that it's invasive to their privacy, then there has to be steps taken to answer that specific fear. Because if you don't do that, you're spinning your wheels. And if you just have the information just go one way to the public, they feel they're being dictated to, and people don't like that, and they don't listen. So sometimes it's better to ask them what their fears are and respond to those fears. Because a lot of it's misinformation. Maybe as of now they can't. Maybe they could zoom into your car, but they probably right now don't. But mostly they probably don't really care right now. But I think the general public might have fears that maybe sometime in the near future. You don't know when they're going to do it.
That's the problem. And I think we have to be facilitators. We can't necessarily. I mean, that's what I look at myself as the planning board chair. I'm not there to push my personal view on them. I mean, there people have concerns about things like that. I mean, the latest is the people who get speeding tickets because they use Easy Pass, and I mean, there is that fear out there that what was supposed to be a convenience is now a police tool. And not that people should be speeding, but there's that evolution that things are being used for what they weren't initially sold to the public as.
Exactly, and we have to respond to those types of fears. And perhaps there could be legislative tools and laws written to protect us better from the new technology. And I think people worry about that the legislature and the people are putting through new technologies and they're not putting any safeguards to our privacy. And if you allay those fears, then I think we would, do a better job. Thank you.
Yeah, Brian.
If I could take it one step further, I believe all communications between the Strafford Regional Planning Commission and all town and city planning offices take effect also, right? They're always informed, kept up to date, what's going on, what these projects are, what they, fair thought.
Anyone else?
I did just want to, regarding the cameras along this Spalding, if you go on the 511 page and actually look at one of the live feeds, I don't know if it's working right now, Glenn, I'm not sure if you know, but
I don't know.
Yeah, I know they were working on the 511 page recently, but when it's active and up and running, if you want to look at one of the live feeds from one of the cameras, you'll see how grainy and coarse. It's definitely not a high definition camera, so you really can't see.
We'll see.
Yeah,
We'll see when the first person gets arrested that shouldn't have been. We'll see.
so I don't want to.
No, and as long as there are perfectly good guidelines that indicate when they can be doing this invasive stuff and how it can be used and who gives them permission to use that, I have no problem with it. But generally, these things get put up in the name of safety, keep the traffic flowing, be able to divert traffic, get the wreckers there earlier and all that. And then all of a sudden, because it's combined not just with the Department of Transportation, but it's adjunct with the Department of Safety. And all of a sudden it becomes a police issue. And I have a real problem with that, because when I'm not breaking the law, I don't think I should have anybody tracking me. As opposed to, well, we're doing this for your good. You know, that, and as long as the guidelines are in place, I don't have a problem with it. But frequently, the project gets up before the guidelines get established.
Bob?
The issue is you, as a elected official, need to watch that. I can tell you point blank, I'm involved in it in multiple states. Highways does not give that to law enforcement. Law enforcement doesn't want it. Now,
Well, that may be well and good, but the reality is they've got it.
no, they don't.
Yeah, in New Hampshire they do, Bob. In New Hampshire, it's a combined service with DOT. So,
There, you might want to do a little research to find out, because that is not my understanding
well, I
in
know what I
any
was told
state.
in Concord. That's all I can tell you.
When people in the public research some of the federal programs, they always notice that the people on the councils are, for instance, Homeland Security. And people are very weary of Homeland Security. So it seems like Homeland Security and some federal departments, also the Department of Transportation, is all there. So you really have to allay those fears now. I agree, people are thinking that it could be used for something else later on. And it sounds funny to say this now, but you know how things can progress. So, thank you.
Anyone else on this topic? Well, then, we are ready to step forward to access management.
Yeah, I'm going to take this one. Greg,
Okay.
our data collection technician, he was going to give a presentation about this today, but he wasn't feeling that well, so he didn't make it in today. But I'm sure you're all well aware of access management issues across the region. Basically being too many curb cuts on a lot of our major arterials, and basically what we're trying to do is develop some GIS data layers where we can help, where we can analyze and begin to measure how well our transportation system is working. Currently, we're developing an access management data layer where we're placing a point down on each curb cut along major corridors such as 125, 108, let's see, we've done Route 11, 152, most of the major state corridors in our region. But what we're looking to do is we're going to take that data layer, we're going to take things like the crash data from DOT, and ultimately we're going to do some time travel.
Be careful there, Dan.
Sounding better and better.
Time trial runs.
There you go.
Time travel. That would be nice. Time trial runs where we see how long it actually takes to move through a corridor. So we're going to take all these data layers and we're going to really dig into the problem areas in our region. It's too bad Greg wasn't here. He had a nice little presentation for this, but he's been working really hard to create this access management data layer. But it's just going to be one of the many layers that we use to develop these figure out these problem areas in our transportation system. Like I said, I don't have too much more. I don't know if you want to elaborate on
You know,
this?
I think it's again one of those data tools that we didn't have before, but as we're moving towards more quantitative based measurements to see if our projects are working, or to understand what the best projects are when we're prioritizing projects, using these points to compare how many access points there are on a stretch of roadway to the number of traffic accidents or whatever else you might have, are really going to give us better understanding of maybe there are some policies that communities could change, or different ways we could go about driveways on certain roadways that would work better, and hopefully it'll help us drive our project selection and help us pick better projects that are going to do more for the community, so the region, I guess.
I'm just kind of curious about how the decisions are made, I guess, to give curb cuts would be a good way to say it. 'Cause there's obviously a natural tension between the person that owns a property and the folks maintaining the road and wanting to keep traffic flows. I know what,
So,
I mean, are you forced to give a curb cut if there's X number of feet or something like that? How's that work?
within an urban compact, I think it's up to the actual
Right,
community.
but
They have
most
their
of
own
that land
standards.
developed. What happens?
Yeah.
What happens right outside the urban compact?
With DOT from District 6, what I learned is that every parcel, I guess, if you have enough frontage, minimum frontage limitations for the community for building, you're guaranteed one driveway permit, and there's up to 4 that you can get total. So depending on the length of road frontage you have and all these other factors, they can give you up to 4 driveways. That's basically all that's written. So you're guaranteed 1, up to 4. They can become more restrictive if there's an agreement between the community and District 6, where you'd have to write up some kind of MOU, tie it to, or memorandum of understanding, which is just an agreement between the community and DOT. I think the community can, they can agree to some different form of standards. It needs to be tied to some standards. The MOU is usually primarily about communication, but it can also tie it to another document. Like, I believe in Rochester, they were using corridor study on Route 11 to help them determine what they were going to do for the new build out up on Granite Ridge. And they actually have a little bit tighter standards than they have in other areas.
That's a little bit different than the standard person that owns, 300 feet on Farmington Road, as opposed to the city owning that whole big chunk of property and being able to build an internal road and stuff like that. But, I mean, has the standard changed, I guess, I'm wondering, through the years?
Not since the 70s.
Along like a
82.
125 or something?
72?
It's the same?
82.
Yeah, it's
82.
the same.
Can you enforce like a right turn only or something like that? Can you?
Well, we need to give them access to it, but again, like Mark was saying, is if they want more than one, then we need to evaluate it, it's the right solution. We're also working with them to come up with maybe a different solution, maybe using access roads versus curb cuts, to try to keep the traffic flowing. So it's, I think, more of a partnership with the
So
owner.
it's a negotiated.
It's a negotiated
kind of
type thing,
yeah.
and what is the best solution for the traffic, the landowner in the town.
'Cause I'm just thinking off the top of my head about from the Califf intersection going south on 125. It's virtually all open right there. You've got Knight's Garage, and you got two or three little restaurants there, and then you have the school and the theater, and there's a lot of.
And if when it starts expanding out, you start getting a lot of curb
Yeah,
cuts. That can
right.
be issues. But then trying to plan ahead, we would maybe get some access roads built in there so we can avoid that.
Yeah.
It would be a big plus.
I know in California, oftentimes they're, or at this point, with all the build out they're doing to protect their main arterials, they're basically requiring businesses to build a road on the side. So you have your main road, you have your road on the side, you have an access point every half mile or whatever to get to that road. But if you want to access any of the services, you can do that off that other road, which isn't for your through traffic or your commute traffic. It's just for
That doesn't
access.
sound like New England or New Hampshire in particular.
No, this is, I mean, they had to do this out
Yeah,
there because
right.
the sprawl was getting out of control. It is out of control, but I don't know if that's a solution New Hampshire would be looking into in the future, but
But it just seems it's going to become a bigger and bigger issue.
Yeah.
More and more attention's going to build up, it seems to me.
Well, actually, the solution in Granite Ridge and the original Route 11 corridor study incorporated that concept of a frontage road or a back road that carried traffic between lots.
Yeah, but most of the land's owned in much smaller chunks and by individuals and not,
Right.
you know, it's easy when it's the city and they own, 100 acres. A little different than a little guy that owns 2 acres.
They did do a study on 125 a few years ago about access and setting standards. I don't know where it's gone or what they're doing with that, but they did spend a lot of time looking at that, setting standards.
We have that in the office actually, and it gives a lot of, basically those recommendations, access roads, you could have them here to here, in the future you're going to want to build this out. It also talks about capacity expansion that's going to be needed in the future on 125, and it gives some ideas of best practices, but it's just a guiding document, and it depends on how, I guess it differs from how things actually happen.
But we do reference this in every project that we receive.
Yeah.
On the 125. We always, that's the fundamental referral. Everybody goes back to the 125 corridor study, and that's the first thing we tell them is, please look at the 125 corridor study. We make it available and we go through it with them and answer any questions they have on how to interpret that and any changes that have occurred. So we do use that, yeah.
And just a couple comments. From a local planning perspective, this is always a really huge challenge, and it presents another one of these trade-offs. You have the community's interest in maximizing the efficiency of public infrastructure, which is a roadway. You have the private property's interest in having as great an access to their property as possible. But the fact is, the more turning movements there are, the more it slows down traffic, and the more frequently you need to have traffic signals, things of that sort. So there's always this sort of balancing and trade-off thing. Fortunately, the city of Rochester, as was mentioned earlier, in terms of the Granite Ridge District, tried to be proactive in terms of dealing with that. But it is not an insignificant issue. In terms of this discussion today, though, is this in the context of creating a best management practices sort of document that would be available for the member communities, or is this just further? Why are we talking about this today at this moment?
I don't know that it's necessarily to create a best management practices, say, toolkit or something like that, but it certainly could go in that direction. This is more of a way of
So in the next reauthorization, we're going to have to do performance measurements and bench lines. And having the access management, all these points in our data and all the attributes connected, and then Dan and our staff have done an excellent job of compiling and updating crash information. And so what we're doing now is we're starting to put this together so that we can do some of the time trials, because everything in the future we're going to have to show performance. Just like you were asking previously, does this intersection, does this investment that we made in this intersection increase the efficiency and the safety? Yes? No? How do you show that? And so that's what we're working towards. The second part is the standards. So yes, this can go forward into planning standards. So you're going to hear us saying in the future months over and over and over again, standards, standards, standards. We all need to develop standards that we can measure against so that we can determine whether what we're investing our money in is working. You know, is this the best way for us to move forward? So we have to make some choices, and by putting together things like this with layer after layer after layer, we're able to do these analyses. And to Dan's credit, he's done an amazing job, and you know, I'm just really happy that we did access management on Route 4 back in 10 years ago, and we had to do it all in the field. Now we're doing it from the computers in our office, and it's more accurate. And it limits the amount of time that we actually have to go out and do field checks and verify what it is that's there and what type of curb cut and the condition of it. And we're even measuring the cuts. So this is going to increase our ability to provide you the information that you're asking about. So I'm all for this, and I absolutely believe in it.
And I think it's a tool for communities also to evaluate their own, development. If you have a project coming in, you can slap on the access management layer on the roadway it's happening on, and then, get an idea of, okay, there's already a ton of turning movements that are possible on this road. Maybe they could share a driveway. Maybe we could do something different. Just to evaluate, is this the best choice for this area? And I guess give you another tool in evaluating and balancing that public and private benefit. Without having the data, you don't have anything to compare against. So now that the data is in place, it's just another tool in the toolkit to make better decisions, I think, down the road.
And I guess that's sort of the crux of my issue, is that to the extent that you're doing this work, if it can be done in a way that can be translatable and usable by the local communities, we may be doing something to be able to check off a box someplace saying that we've done it, but if we can make it useful at the same time, and for local communities, access management, for the communities that have professional planning staff and engineers available, things of that sort, that may be something that they regularly do, but for smaller communities that don't have that staff, having some sort of a standard or a way of approaching this, I think could be really useful. So I guess my encouragement would be the same. Remember we were talking about the there was sort of a roadway that had some scenic views and things of that sort we talked about a couple of months ago, and the question was, could that particular product be used in multiple ways so we get multiple bangs for the buck? I guess my same question would be here, is what you're doing can be made available to smaller communities, then everybody benefits.
I think it'll definitely be translatable because it is just a standard GIS layer if I'm understanding what's happening correctly. So
yeah, we certainly don't want to push any regulations on communities or anything like that. Right now we're just focusing on developing the data. But again, it could be used in a few different ways. So for now, we want to get it done and try to collect all the data and go from there. I guess I'd love to, once we get this done and some of the time travel data together, I would love to bring it back to this group and to our tech and lay out the possibilities that we have and what can we use it for. See which communities might want to dig deeper and really use the data.
This access management means different things to different people, at least in my community. There are some people who Comeau Road in Rollinsford, which is going up to Walmart and so forth, the people on that road, they want to make access to Comeau Road more difficult to keep all the people from Maine and so forth from cutting through our town. When I get ready to come up here this morning, I'm really concerned about access from my house to here, 10.5 miles or so. And I've got to go through part of Rochester and either Somersworth or Dover. And different times of the day, I take different routes because for 35 years of experience in this area, I know where the congestion is going to be at certain hours. So it depends on the time of the day which direction I take to get home as fast as possible. But so I'm mainly concerned what they do in Somersworth and Dover, a little bit here in Rochester. In Rollinsford, what we do is not going to help me very much. Most of us are going to some adjacent community, and how you get through Somersworth and Dover and so forth is our problem. And I want to know the amount of time it takes me to go from my house to here at different times of the day. So different road segments. One place you can zip along pretty quick, another one you got to really slow down. They got that speed limit there, and they got the school flashing at certain times of the day, and a whole host of things like that that influence which road I take. And a lot that kind of information, why you say you shouldn't be zipping through fast anyhow, but most people are trying to get from point A to point B as fast as they can because they're already running right the way we do.
That's the key word, as fast as they can. And it's obvious that they just, when they get out of work or going to work, they just want to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible without any fewer restrictions as possible.
Yeah, so I want a few driveway cuts in Somersworth or Dover, but in Brownsford, the people say, we'll have a lot of driveway cuts and get that road down to 15 miles an hour. So they don't come here. So that's what,
Mr. Chair, I know Ed wants to speak, but...
Yes, Ed. Just two seconds.
Okay.
Dan, does Google Maps actually use their own access management? Because like what the chairman just said, when they tell you to go to Walmart down the street, I mean, it tells you the entrance. So what are they using to know which way they're going? You know what I mean? Do they have their own access management computer system so they know how to get you to the point A to point B the quickest possible?
No, what that system uses is it's basically a line data set that has speed limits and distance in it. So what it does is it calculates the fastest, shortest way to get from point A to point B. It doesn't have anything like curb cuts. So in theory, you could have a road that's 45 miles an hour, but because there are curb cuts every 20, 30 feet, you might not be traveling at 45 miles an hour. But Google still thinks that's the speed limit for that road. That's what you're going to be traveling at. So in reality, it might not be the fastest way to get from point A to point B, but according to the data that they use, that's the fastest way. So.
Thank you.
To more directly answer your question, Google Maps is basically using data that's uploaded from local governments collectively. And you will find right now, if you went to any number of different commercial mapping such as Google, what you'll find is information that's a year or two old. That's one of the reasons, if you look at some of the vehicular GPS systems, that's why they sell you new maps every couple of years. They are collecting data that's been uploaded by private individuals and other governments. They are not generating or creating data.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I have to leave. I have another meeting of the LCHIP board right now. In fact, I'm late. But I wanted to say something about the federal reauthorization bill. And Mark's prepared to talk more. But I just wanted to say for the policy committee to understand is that the regional planning commissions, the transit authorities, and the metropolitan planning organizations have been working with the congressional delegation for New Hampshire since last fall on this reauthorization bill, and in specific language dealing with issues for transit and issues on the size of an MPO and what is the minimum size of an MPO. So the change in the federal legislation in the Senate changes the minimum size of an MPO from 50,000 to 200,000. And Senator Shaheen has worked very diligently in the Senate to protect the status of existing MPOs in the state of New Hampshire, because all of us would have been impacted by this. And so what is in the information that you picked up today from the AMPO update tells you what is being done and proposed in that Senate bill, and that is Senator Shaheen and her staff that put that together. And I want you to be very clear that our delegation has been working with us on both sides, and Congressman Gunta has been doing the same thing to protect the New Hampshire MPOs in the House side. And then I'm going to leave now, but I know Rad can bring you further information about the work that the New Hampshire congressional delegation has done to assist the transit agencies. You know, something, it's like being at a planning board and you're doing a site application or a subdivision, and you're trying to think of everything that could possibly happen, and then